there's Mr. Oh, okay. If there's no further discussion, then the vote is on the.
Sir. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Grayson is recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the gentleman from Georgia a few questions, and I'll yield to him for the purpose of having answers to these questions. Does the gentleman from Georgia know what a bill of attainder is?
The answer is yes. In fact, it's been very explicitly described by the courts.
What is it?
The courts have applied a two-pronged test. Number one, whether specific individuals or entities are affected by the statute, and number two, whether legislation inflicts a, quote, punishment, unquote, on those individuals. And serves no legitimate regulatory purpose.
What does the Constitution say about bills of attainder?
I suggest that this is not a bill of attainder. It certainly does focus upon a specific entity, but it does not inflict punishment by any means. In fact,
will the gentleman from Georgia explain what the Constitution says about bills of attainder?
Mr. Chairman, the gentleman yield for a second. The gentleman from Florida.
No, I'd like an answer to my question.
Well, frankly, I can't wait to see the discussion when it comes to
I did not
medical
yield, and I'd like an answer from the gentleman from Georgia
if we
to my
could,
question.
let's get back to all the time. Is the gentleman from Florida, who has yielded to the gentleman from Georgia.
Right. What does the Constitution say about bills of attainder? It's a simple question.
The Constitution says that Congress shall pass no bills of attainder, but this is not one.
All right. Now, would you agree with me that it is unconstitutional to single out one or more persons without the benefit of trial?
No, sir. There's a two-pronged test, and this is not a bill of attainder.
All right. Well,
so,
when I said I'll reclaim my time, I just quoted William Rehnquist writing the book The Supreme Court. He wrote that book and said you cannot single out one or more persons without the benefit of trial. Will gentlemen agree that bills of attainder are contrary to every principle of sound legislation?
There are two main criteria which courts would likely look in order to determine whether legislation is a bill of attainder. One is whether there's a specific individual entities affected by the statute. Number two, whether the legislation affects a punishment on those individuals. And
will the gentleman please tell me whether you agree or not that bills of attainder are contrary to every principle of sound legislation?
Bills of attainder are unconstitutional.
And contrary to every principle of sound legislation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And you know who said that?
Tell me.
James Madison in the Federalist Papers. Now, does the gentleman agree that the bill of attainder clause was intended not as a narrow or technical provision, but rather as an implementation of the separation of powers and a general safeguard against legislative exercise of the judicial function, or more simply, trial by legislature? Will the gentleman agree with me about that?
Will the gentleman yield?
No.
Would the gentleman restate the question?
The question is, will the gentleman from Georgia agree with me that the bill of attainder clause was intended not as a narrow or technical provision, but as an implementation of separation of powers, a general safeguard against legislative exercise of the judicial function, or more simply, trial by legislature? Will the gentleman agree to that?
No, sir, I will not. And I ask counsel to help us with this, and I think all this is a determination of the court, and I'd like to yield to Mr. Sensenbrenner.
Well, I'm sorry, but it's my time, not yours or Mr. Sensenbrenner, so I will reclaim my time, and I will point out that what you just said you would not agree to is from a Supreme Court case called United States v. Broun, something I would expect you might know about, given your name.
Okay.
Listen.
Would the gentleman yield?
No. Listen, we are trampling on people's constitutional rights. And I think it's unfortunate that the mania that exists on the other side of the aisle regarding this one organization And we know why that mania exists. It's because they've registered an awful lot of Democrats, continues to distort and waste the time of this committee and many other committees here in Congress. Enough is enough. I yield my remaining 5 seconds.
Mr. Chairman.
My time has expired.
The gentleman's time has expired, but Mr. Spinner can claim his own time.
Chairman, I move to